Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our fantastic Market Motive Simplilearn Forward webinar this morning, specifically for you all. My name is Dan Beaven, and I'll be your webinar host today. And this program is going to be about social media, the pros and cons of paying for social placement. Now, with organic social reach falling across all platforms, marketers are facing a difficult choice: to work overtime to create the content so amazing that people can't help but share it, or to pay for established social media voices that are going to promote your content for you. Now, there's a balance to this, and to learn to do this, you need to balance the increased exposure need with the risks of pushing the boundaries too far. And we'll help you discover the pros and cons of paying for editorial placements, paid social endorsements, and more. Our speaker today is Matt Bailey. Matt is a best-selling author, marketing expert, corporate trainer, and professional speaker. Matt is the digital marketing instructor for the Direct Marketing Association in New York City, and he's also a member of the digital marketing faculty for Simplilearn and Market Motive. And he's also an instructor for the OMCP, that's the Online Marketing Certified Professional Program. And he's the author of numerous best-selling books on marketing, including Internet Marketing, An Hour a Day, and Wired to be Wowed. And his new book is Teach New Dogs Old Tricks. And today he is sharing his knowledge with you. Matt, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it, and glad to be here. Yeah, getting into especially social media and looking at all the options that are available for marketing and for getting your brand name out. Marketers now are faced with a significant number of decisions and opportunities, and it's not getting any easier. And so I just want to walk through a little bit of a framework as far as what's available to us today, what are some of the implications of that, as well as maybe some recommendations, but also some observations about the current state of social marketing and what we need to do as brands to maintain and gain visibility, whether using existing networks or piggybacking through relationships that we can build through these social channels. Okay, now from a big picture point of view, when we're talking about the trends of social media and the things that we need to be aware of, the number one thing that is pushing companies towards paid placement is that organic reach is getting smaller and smaller every week. More and more of these social networks realize they need to monetize. And so they're going to monetize through paid sponsorships and paid opportunities. And so the organic reach is going to significantly decline, and it's going to continue to decline simply because the social networks, I think especially Facebook, if they showed you everything in your stream that was targeted to you or within all the people that you would be following, be about 15,000 posts per day that you would see just on Facebook. In reality, Facebook limits that now to a few hundred simply because it would be overwhelming. And also, based on monetization, they've come up with a formula that will expose you to a certain amount of ads so that they can continue to monetize themselves. Now, the second part, and probably one of the most infuriating parts to many businesses, it's the metrics. It's measuring everything to be sure that you're getting a good return on investment, that you can results for a campaign. Metrics are infuriating because many social networks are just not providing the data necessary to know if you've developed a good campaign. Then again, when we also bring in influencer marketing through social media, the ability to measure gets even more difficult because now we're looking more at soft measurements. We're looking at specific campaigns through a third party, and we can't always control all of the measurements and the tactics that are being used across multiple media. So metrics, especially within social media, has always been a little difficult. But then in getting to a return on investment, that is a significant obstacle. if everyone can make sure, just double check your microphones, make sure they're muted because I am getting some noise in the background here, and I would appreciate that. Thank you. The third thing to consider is our goals. What is it that you want out of these campaigns? How is it being measured? And again, this comes back on the metrics aspect. You see, in most companies where I've worked with them or where we've gone in and done some auditing of campaigns, the one thing that really sticks out is a lack of centered goals for a campaign. What are you trying to drive? How are you trying to drive it? And what do you want out of it? Basically, asking some essential questions at the onset of the campaign rather than wondering how we can justify it afterwards. I've just seen too many companies that really approach social media with the sense of we want to get more visibility, but really not coming apart with some tangible, measurable goals. So when we look at the big picture of social reach, as I said, our organic postings are going to get smaller and smaller, and the only way you're going to get the largest audience possible is through doing paid promoted social posting. That will give you the biggest audience possible. The next audience that you will get is more of the organic social, which is significantly smaller than what you'll get from a paid promoted post. The last level, which is really the smallest target, I find to be one of the most intriguing targets to go after in paid social, and that is what we call maybe dark social, or it's also social that you can purchase through a programmatic approach. And that is through a series of data targets, and this can be through retargeting or doing some very isolated targeting techniques in order to get the right message in front of a known user through their social network. That is what we call dark social or programmatic social, where I can put a specific message in front of a lead or a buyer or a customer, and I can provide a very personalized or timely message based on an event, behavior, something where I know that I've got a strong chance of converting them with a very specific message. So those are the three areas that I can develop some targeting and understand the reach of the audience that I'm going to reach, or that I'm going to get in front of in each of these campaigns. Now, also on the metrics side, just a few articles from the rough few months that Facebook has been having is, again, when we are looking at marketing through a third party, we are tied in. We are tied into the metrics they report. The problem is, are they reporting metrics the right way? And so Facebook has gone through a significant problem in over-reporting, under-reporting, overestimating video view time. One of the things that you might remember is as you're going through your Facebook newsfeed, and if someone posts a video and the video starts playing, that is technically not considered a view until you click on it and you can hear the video. What was happening is as soon as the video would start playing, Facebook considered that a view, and it was charging advertisers based on that. Then also different areas of Facebook Live were having a problem with misreporting likes. And so if you were basing any of these campaigns off of video views, likes, or engagement statistics, really what came out is those are undependable. And depending upon what format they were taking place in, it was a problem. And so Facebook right now has brought in an audit group to look at how they are measuring and reporting, but ultimately most social media channels have had to go through this problem. It's a growing up process, but also when you're looking at different methodologies within a specific channel, So you've got a paid aspect, a social aspect, maybe you've got some other things like Facebook Live and Facebook Canvas. So you've got other means of communicating within that channel. They each are going to affect different levels of measurement, and it becomes much more complicated. Ultimately, what we have to know is we are locked in to their measurements. Now, we can provide some of our structure and our measurements based on where we drive people and what we're asking them to do. Ultimately, if we are driving them to one of our own properties, then we can get some level of measurement that we can stack up and compare against that third party or that social measurement. You see, the main problem is understanding whose audience we are targeting. You see, whenever we use Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, any of these in partnership, really what we're looking at is a second-party platform. You see, we are working with them to reach their audience. Even though our audience may like us or follow us, they're not always going to see everything we post. That is the limitation of the organic side, and the only way to get our message in front of most of them is to pay for it. That's a second-party relationship. That means the audience technically belongs to that social media. It's their platform, it's their audience, their metrics, and they're the ones who are monetizing that audience. And so even though they may follow us, like us, engage with us, it's not technically our audience. We're renting that audience because we're utilizing and reaching them on a second-party platform. So it's that cooperative approach. And so when we start to view the audience in those terms, that will help us now understand that, we need to then drive that audience into more of a first-party relationship. When we have that first-party relationship, then we can communicate to them on our terms, on our platform, in the way that we want. Until that happens, we can only rent the space, and we can only reach them, and we don't know who they all are, so they technically belong to that social media platform, and we have to work cooperatively and understand that principle of ownership. Once you do, it will change how you approach your social campaigns. You see, what we're trying to do ultimately is drive users into that first-party relationship, utilizing these second-party relationships through posts, social tiles, sponsored posts, and we can utilize infographics and things like that. But what we're trying to do is develop assets, develop content assets that essentially we can sell to those second-party relationships, to our audiences there. And we drive audiences to that content asset, whether it's a YouTube video or a white paper or an online demo or an application. You see, the blog post, the white paper, the online demo, those are our properties. And so anywhere the user comes to our property, we can measure it because it's on our platform. However, if all they're engaging with is our blog post or a YouTube video or a social tile, then we have to rely on the measurements of that second-party platform. So as users go through that decision funnel where they discover, they learn, they try, buy, what we're trying to do is push people through a consistent campaign to interact with our content asset, which ultimately drives them to a decision point. And that's where we gain our lead. And once we get the lead, then they go into our nurturing system. And so looking at social media, looking at all these platforms as a way to cooperatively talk to a second-party audience and drive them to a first-party relationship. Now also, when we start talking about driving engagement, looking at these audiences, we need to understand how people engage, and based on what type of site they're on, it will largely determine the type of behavior that they exhibit. Now, this is the engagement pyramid, and this is something that I would say I started working on this probably about 12, 13 years ago, and looking at thousands of websites in their analytics, I found that there is a consistency of behavior based on how people find your website. Now, at the top of the pyramid, as you can see, are blogs and editorial content, articles, news, things like that. And what that means is that people who are on those types of sites, blogs, editorial sites, news, if they come to your site from there, they are going to stay longer, they're going to do more and read more. They're going to be much more engaged coming from that type of site than if they come from any other source. Now, the main reason for that is if they are reading articles about cars and looking at maybe comparisons or news about that, and then they click and go to your site, you see the context was already there. They were already on a page about that content. And so finding a link on that page or seeing a link there is naturally going to be in their stream of thinking. And so when they click on it, it's just a natural process. And as I said, they'll tend to stay longer, read more, do more, and convert at a higher rate because of the high context of content. Now, also, there is a lack of competition at the top of the pyramid. Meaning, if you're on a blog or if you're on a news site or an article, there are not a lot of links in the editorial content. There may be some ads, but those are limited. And so because the content is more editorial in nature, there is less competition for the reader's attention. And so the links are limited. So when they do click on a link, it's a highly contextual link, and there's not a lot of competition for their attention. As I said, it's a natural stream of consciousness behavior. Now, the next level here is video. When someone is on YouTube, they are, or any other video marketing type of site, it's high context. They're within a certain subject matter or within a specific user. There's less competition for their attention. More competition than if it were a blog or an editorial site. Then we get into forums, and I put Pinterest into here as well, mainly because of the high contextual nature. In forums, people are sharing information. It is typically a forum dedicated to a specific content matter or subject matter. And the same thing in Pinterest, where the content is grouped into specific subject matter. And so, again, there's a little more competition, but it's contextually very similar. Search tends to be in the middle, and it's very interesting here because when people search for content, they determine the context based on the word or words that they use. The competition for the searcher's attention is about the same every time. It's about 15 to 20 links on the page based on the results, or if there are video results or local results. The competition is usually about the same, but how people respond to a search is that if they don't see what they want on your site, they know all they have to do is click their back button, and they've got about 10 to 13 more options. Now, at the bottom of the pyramid, we start getting into less and less engagement based on the source of the visitor. So at the very bottom, we see Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook's just above there. Facebook's a little more engaging because the amount of time people spend there. And then underneath that, the Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram. When you think about being on any of these platforms, there is very little context, meaning if you're on a news article, it's about a specific subject. However, if you're paging through your news feed on Facebook, or if you're looking at a Twitter stream or an Instagram stream, from one to the other, there's not a lot of context. In fact, the context is really scattered. Unless you're following a specific person, But even then, based on their stream of consciousness, which is what Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram seems to be more, you're not going to get a consistent stream of contextually related information. Because of that, when people click on a link, it's mainly because something grabs their attention. But also, what's driving this factor here at the bottom of the pyramid is there is a lot of competition for their attention. Think about your newsfeed on Facebook. It's very easy to go from one to the other and see so many things in your stream. There's a lot of competition for your attention. Yes, that ad may look great, but it's also mixed in with personal updates from friends or your network. And so when you consider a lot of competition for your attention, a low context of subject matter, what it results in is a lot of single page, 2-second visits. That is typical of visitors that come from Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, or even Facebook. They click on it because it's interesting, but their time on site, their engagement, and their chances of conversion are all very low. And so based on how people find your information, how they find your ad, your link, whatever type of site it is, will largely determine the type of behavior that they will exhibit. And so when we think about how we want to engage people and what type of message we want to get across, we also need to put it in terms of how we are going to be reaching them and what networks or what mediums may be more effective in communicating certain messages in order to develop the type of engagement that we want out of the campaign. So we need to come up with a plan, and that strategy will help us understand how we can best engage with people, what channels would provide the best exposure and visibility for a specific message, what medium will help us communicate that message more effectively, or also what mediums are going to give us the broadest audience. What mediums or channels are going to provide the best brand control, and how we can reach people at scale with the message that we have in order to maximize the amount of return, but then also questions of measurement. Who's going to measure? What measurements are we going to rely on? And what ultimately will be measured? So this is the big picture. We need to understand that in order to understand all of the questions and ask the right questions about how we are going to apply this campaign and develop a proper set of expectations of what it will bring. Now, let's get into some of the pros and cons, the actual content, and really the title of the webinar here. And we're going to get into some of these here. Now, pros and cons. Number one is that the costs of paid social placement are relatively low, starting at the basic level, but they are increasing very quickly. Let me explain that. Just to get into some sponsored posts or even some paid tweets, the costs are really kind of low to do that. However, the con of that is that it is increasing quickly, but at the really how inexpensive it is just to get a few blog posts, sponsored blog posts, or even get into the paid social sponsorships or the paid posts. Those are so inexpensive. Really, it's nothing to boost a campaign on Facebook and increase the visibility. But one thing we've noticed when you look at the rate of growth over the past few years, it is increasing, and so it may be interesting to see how quickly the costs rise. Now, a couple of the things that will help this is the more targeting that you do, the less of a cost that it will provide. So if you're targeting locally or regionally, it will cost less because you're reaching a smaller group of target people. So if you're trying to do something very broad and it's more of a national or a national type of campaign, you're going to be competing with other people that are trying to reach that same group of people. So again, you can keep the cost low by developing more targeting techniques, but ultimately right now it's a very affordable way at scale to get your message across to a large group of people. The next is the exposure. So again, we can utilize both the organic and the paid in order to present different messages for different purposes. So for example, if all we're doing is looking for some feedback, one of the examples here is from the Ford F-150 Facebook, where it was really just a question of what do you think about the concept? And from an organic standpoint, a fantastic response, about 3,000 responses, almost 500 shares. So it was a great way to engage the existing audience of followers of the F-150 page, and you can do this on any platform, and it's probably what we're most familiar with is providing a good engaging picture as well as a good question inviting people's feedback. Now from a paid standpoint, you can utilize some sponsored posts, and that will increase the engagement. And ultimately, we want to try and drive something. So I love the example here where we're going to engage them with a video, but the call to action is to take a test drive. And so, depending upon the creative or depending upon the ad campaign, you're creative. If you're developing a video, those costs will be separate, and it may vary depending upon resources and budgets that you've got. But really, if you're looking just to put a sponsored post on Facebook, it can be anywhere from $1,000 to $4,000, depending upon the exposure you want, or even more than that. Now, on the dark social side, or the paid, that's more where I love using this more for a conversion technique. That if I know someone has been to the site, or I know someone has exhibited the behavior of a buyer, then I can provide a very personalized, targeted message to them, such as, for example here, a rebate message, in order to get them to click through and act on that, and that's to drive conversions, to drive leads. So the nice thing is I can't rely completely on paid. I can't rely completely on organic. It takes a mix of all of these in order to increase that exposure. So I think it's a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing, because, again, we're talking about second-party platforms, and those are methods that we've got to rely on in order to get that, because obviously it's not our platform. It's their platform. All right. The next thing is more and more integration is happening where we can develop ads that take place within the platform. So rather than just the typical campaign that drives people to a landing page, especially with Facebook Canvas, people can now work within the ad without ever leaving Facebook. And so it gives people the ability to engage, to learn, and find out more about your brand or about that campaign without going to a specific landing page. Now, again, there's some pros and cons with that. The pro is they're engaging, they're learning more. The con is it's not on my platform. I can't measure that. I have to rely now on Facebook Canvas to give me the metrics and show me what's happening. So it's nice. It forces us to be a little more creative if we're going to utilize that. But the downside is we are driving them to third-party platforms, third-party metrics. Now, the same with Twitter cards. It's a way to get your business more visibility through Twitter. One nice thing is Instagram, obviously, is building in, and Facebook as well, some additional call to action buttons that are more focused. So rather than click here, now we're getting something that's a little more we can utilize based on the type of campaign. So if it's a watch more, download, sign up, shop now, those are some more custom messages. Now, we're not to the point yet where we can determine the type of message that we want other than in the ad copy, but that's something that they may be developing over time, is being able to customize that a little more so that the call to action is much more specific about what we want people to do. Now, the downside of some of the social advertising is what makes your creative agency insane, is that all of the different display sizes based on what you're trying to do on different on different social networks, and even Facebook. Even though you may use an ad that's one size, when after it has been engaged with or receiving likes, Facebook may resize it. And so you've got to plan on that potential resizing of the ad on Facebook based on how people are interacting with it. That even though you load a specific size, it may only be displayed at a different size and being squeezed out. In that case, is your brand going to be visible? Is your message going to be communicated when it gets squeezed? And also, just because you're developing an ad on Facebook doesn't mean it's going to translate well to Instagram. You've got to develop, again, making sure your brand, your messaging is clear, and that it's not lost when it's translated to a different network at a different ad size. And so there is very little consistency in ad sizes across multiple social networks. Probably the only social network that adheres to any standard is LinkedIn, with the rectangle, leaderboard, and skyscraper ads. YouTube is also a little more focused on the IAB ad sizes, and so, but again, it's going to be a little differently depending upon what they offer in terms of inventory, rather than just a specific set of guidelines. As you can see, YouTube offers two different sizes of display ads, two different sizes of overlay ads. One of each you could probably utilize within LinkedIn, but then when it comes to Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, you'll need to resize all of those ads in each of the networks. So there's a lot of inconsistency, and especially when it comes to adhering to any type of brand guidelines, is ensuring that your message and your branding is clear in each of the ad sizes. Now, one of the, I would say, my favorite pros of social targeting and social placement is the ability to target an audience. This, to me, is one of the biggest upsides of paying for social placement. See, especially when I'm targeting a sponsored ad or sponsored post, I can utilize demographics or sociographics. I can even, on LinkedIn, if I'm going after a business audience or a more professional audience, I can go through LinkedIn and I can target by job title. I can target by region. I can target by age. I can target by all kinds of things. And then I can also target by location, whether I want to go for a specific local area, regional area, national. I can focus those. And again, the more I target, the more I can extend my budget, because I'm going after a smaller group of people, and maybe I can boost my budget to increase my visibility among that small targeted group of people, therefore ensuring that I can blanket the group that I want. Now, I can also get into day parting, which is a lot of fun because you can develop different messages for daytime, different messages at nighttime. One of my favorite campaigns was targeting entrepreneurs and C-level executives, decision makers, and targeting them one way during the day, and then at night targeting them with an ad campaign, because chances are if they're online at night, they're working. And so it was more of a message of, what are you still doing working? You could be saving time and becoming much more efficient. And so doing a day parting campaign where we knew they would see one ad during the day and then following it up at night, which with a more targeted, personalized presentation, really helped to target that audience. But then also, some of the social networks will allow you to relate your ad to specific interests or affinities. Meaning, based on the behavior of what that person reads or clicks on or who they follow, may help target that a little bit more in terms of behavior, in terms of understanding what they're interested in, which will increase the likelihood of them clicking on your ad. So again, the more targeting you add, the better demographic, the better affinity, the better locally that you target these ads. You not only target it to a smaller audience, but one that is more targeted, more likely to click on those ads and respond. Now, from the programmatic standpoint, I can buy social ads through the programmatic buying. And through programmatic buying, I can develop a retargeting campaign and buy social space. And this is more of that dark social where I can retarget someone through their social network to give a very specific call to action based on what they've done, what they've looked at, and get now them to move more towards being a lead. I can also target them based on their behavior of what kind of sites they visited, what content they visited. So if they have looked at other brand names, if they've looked at other brand names, then I can target a campaign specifically to them that based on that behavior, now they'll start seeing my ads because they're looking at competitor sites. I can also utilize some third-party data, and that will enable a higher level of targeting and a more intelligent buy to a specific group of people. So I can't say enough about this. I love the targeting aspect of being able to utilize social networks for very high, efficient purchasing to drive people to a specific decision point that I know fit the criteria and the target of the audience that I want to reach. Now, some people see this as a pro, some see it as a con, because now when you do an organic post, typically the performance level of an organic post is going to be about 5% or less. Now, you can pay to boost it based on some of the performance. And here's the way I tend to look at that system of boosting an organic post based on the performance. I look back in the days of direct mail and direct marketing, that if you had a list of about 100,000 or 200,000 names, you would test your message. You would send a direct mail piece or two different versions to 2 to 3% of your list. And you would measure the response, and based on that, you would modify the campaign and send out the winner of your A/B test. Well, we do the same thing in email. If we have a list of about 100,000 or 200,000, you can do an A/B test of two different kinds of email to about 2 to 3% of your list, measure the response, and the winner gets sent to the entire list. This is how I look at boosting an organic post based on a performance. It's similar to that direct mail or email testing, that if I put something out there that gets a better than average response, and I'm looking at about maybe 3 to 5% of my audience, I can look at the engagement, I can look at the how many people have seen it, then I can promote it. And so based off the response, that's how I'm viewing how I can test a message in organic, and if it performs well, then I can pay to get that additional visibility based on comparing past performances of organic posts. Now, here comes, I would say, the big con, and that is measurement. Measurement, as I said, is probably the #1 issue that brands face when it comes to both social marketing and then also just really trying to figure out what's going on in campaigns. Now, if we start looking at some of the ways that you can interact with this, with this ad. And this is one thing I like to ask people, is because what you can do is, I can click on the owner. I can click on the brand name and I can go to their page. I can also click on the creative and go to the landing page. I can click on the learn more and go to the landing page. But I can also click the like, I can also comment, and I can also share. Now, depending upon the definition of the campaign, all of those are considered engagement. If someone clicks through to the brand page, if someone, they can also up here, they can like the brand, but not necessarily the post. And so all of this is considered engagement. Now, as we know, not all engagements are the same. However, if I'm having someone reporting engagement to me, the thing I need to remember is I need to define what that engagement is. Because if someone comments or shares, that is a different kind of engagement than if someone just simply likes it. Also, it's a different kind of engagement if someone wants to learn more. You see, learning more is the point of the campaign. That's where I'm trying to drive people. However, if they comment or share, that is very different than just a like. A like is a good engagement, but if someone makes a good comment and they share it with their network, now it's going out across their network. It's being republished. I'm getting some earned media views because with a like it or share it, they are recommending it to their network. So in terms of engagement, I need to value different engagements at different levels. Simply going and clicking on the sponsor page here, that's going to be a lot less. So what engagement do I value more than others? If I'm fine with wrapping all of this into one measurement of engagement, then I'm taking the cost of the campaign, I'm dividing it by all of the engagement factors, and that will give me my cost per engagement. Now, if I only want to say I'm only going to define engagement by comments, shares, likes, and learn more, then I need to define that so that I can be sure that we, the brand, the agency, we're all speaking the same language and all these terms mean the same thing. Now, the same thing if I'm looking at the cost of the campaign in terms of conversion. You see, if I'm looking to measure my cost per click, the like and comment and share, those are great. Those are engagements. If I'm measuring conversion clicks, then I'm looking at people that click the image or click learn more, because that is what drives people to the landing page. Once they come to the landing page, now that's on my network and I can measure that. But I can take the cost of the campaign, divide that by the amount of clicks on the ad, and that gives me my cost per click in terms of measuring the campaign. Finally, if I'm going to look specifically at lead generation, then again, I'm looking at those people that clicked on the creative and the call to action, go to the landing page, and not only that, but complete the landing page and get to the thank you page. Because now they're a lead. See, at this point, all I'm doing is looking at the click. And so being able then to measure appropriately helps me also understand where any problems might be. You see, if I'm not getting good exposure, I'm not getting good impressions in my ad, then maybe I'm not spending enough or maybe I'm not spending enough or targeting appropriately in order to get the amount of impressions that I need. If I'm not getting enough clicks, then the problem is the creative. The creative isn't driving people to do what I want them to do. It also, if I'm getting less engagement, that could be because of the creative as well. So it's also knowing where to analyze and assess problems in the campaign when we see that it may not be performing. And then again, if I'm not getting the leads that I think I should be getting, the problem is in the landing page. And so again, understanding how to diagnose, where each of the measurements comes into play, and making sure that everyone is defining the terms and the measurements in the same way. So then I can get to my cost per lead based on the campaign in terms of measurement. Now, paid editorial exposure. This is one of those things where I'll tell you what, publishers love it, brands love it, but unfortunately, it also gets to the con of this as well, and that's that users, uh, consumers, aren't as excited about native advertising or paid editorials as brands and publishers are. Now, the IAB, here's their statement, is that regardless of context, a reasonable consumer should be able to distinguish between what is paid advertising and what is publisher editorial content. Now, this is big because when we're seeing things like native advertising, it also goes under the name of content syndication. You know this because if you've ever seen anything that says related articles or sponsored articles, that's a key that we are in native advertising. If you don't know what native advertising is, it's ads that are meant to look like the content. It's advertising that is made to look like regular ad or editorial content, whether by use of the same font, the same image sizes. It's sometimes very indistinguishable what is an ad and what is regular editorial content. That means that the ad looks like the native content, and consumers don't like it because they think they're being fooled. Even if they click on a sponsored story that answers their question when they find out that it is a brand written story about a brand and it was paid for that placement, they're not as excited about it. Publishers love it because people click on it, which makes them money. Brands love it because they can control everything and they get good response off of it. Now we see this in advertorials and also in an odd way the BuzzFeed model, which is brands publishing social content. Now that's a little less blurring the lines because you do have the brand next to it, and the brand has its own page in that BuzzFeed model. But I would tell you, my background is in journalism, and every time I talk about native advertising, my mind is on my journalism professor going on and on about how advertising and editorial are two different worlds and they should never mix. And I know my journalism professor is probably 80 years old right now, and I can just imagine the heart attack they have when they see these models coming together. It's such a fascinating world. I want to give you an example of what this looks like. So this is the downside of paid advertorial, editorial type stuff. This is Wired magazine, and here we have the infographic of the day. And then over to the side here, we have it really kind of a defining what the infographic of the day is. It's interesting and topical stories in a fresh visual way. Check back daily. Now, this infographic is about UPS and their supply chain survey. The problem is it looks like Wired content. It looks like an article that you would find in Wired. In fact, Wired does a lot of this type of advertising where brands will pay for specific articles. They will pay for content that looks like it is native to Wired. What consumers have a problem with, and maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't, is right there in middle. Now that I've highlighted it, you can probably see it. But it is a very, very small word in a non-bold presentation that says advertisement. This goes back to the IAB, which is a reasonable consumer should be able to distinguish between what is paid and what is editorial. And so I will leave this up to you. Is this obvious? Is it clear? is it straightforward, the difference between what is paid and what is advertising. So this is the line that native advertising, advertorial, that type of world lives in. And as I said, brands love it, publishers love it. Consumers, though, aren't as excited about it, simply from a credibility standpoint. Now, working with influencers, this kind of follows a similar respect in that it's native content because it's developed by an influencer. It's developed by a personality or a publisher that has a large following, and brands develop a relationship with that influencer. Again, kind of that second party aspect, that we're going to partner with them, and the result will be that some of their followers become our followers. So really, it's kind of like renting a list in order to combine efforts and boost your own followers. Now, a great example of this, you may have heard about this, was Audi partnering with The Onion. And they created Snapchats that were going out during the Super Bowl. So rather than buying a Super Bowl ad, they created more of a guerrilla campaign behind the scenes and with just funny updates related to the game. As you can see, this one, dog doesn't care who wins. And so this was utilizing Onion putting out the content. And of course, if you know anything about The Onion, it's really they were the original fake news, but they knew they were fake news, and it was funny. But it was stories too ridiculous to be true. And so really more of an entertainment site. So Audi allowed The Onion to create the content. And the content was during the Super Bowl, and it drove people to Audi. Now, for the cost of the campaign, it drove about 5,500 new followers, more than 100,000 views, and 2,400 campaign mentions on Twitter with about 37,000 impressions. It added about 2,500 new Twitter followers and 9,000 new Facebook fans. So now they did not disclose the cost of the campaign, but I can give you a pretty good guess when we get into the next slide of what that ran. And so utilizing influencers, again, it's like a rented list. It's like utilizing the best of what that influencer does and associating your brand to it in order to gain more followers. Now, this happened here with Logan Paul, who is again, more of a Snapchat personality, developing videos, and he developed a prank campaign, and that was done with the Sour Patch Kids. So as you can see there, it's a candy, and they've got a couple of candies going on, and they would run around New York pranking people. And they took these videos, they put them on Snapchat. Now, this was about a week-long campaign, and it generated for Sour Patch 120,000 new followers, about 6.8 thousand Snapchat impressions generated, just over 500,000 on the first day, about 26,000 screenshots, and about 1,900 Twitter mentions. So this is the pro. Influencers will increase your reach. Partnering with an influencer, they are receiving payment to promote you to their network. That is the upside of influencer marketing. The downside is it's pricey. So this campaign that was done specifically with Logan Paul, it lasted about a week, and it cost about $100,000 that Sour Patch paid Logan Paul to develop this campaign, to develop this. So when we start getting into the pricing of working with an influencer, the more popular the influencer, this is where the costs are driving up significantly, and they seem to be increasing by about 10 to 30% every year because these influencers are in demand and they know it. And so really just to get a single tweet from an influencer, uh, not bad, between $50 and $100. However, if you want a high visibility blogger or vlogger, video blogger, like a Logan Paul, like a PewDiePie, like one that I know my kids love is Good Mythical Morning. If you want them to promote your product and talk about it on their program, you're looking at about $100,000 to make that happen. A single review from a popular blogger can run as much as $10,000 or more. An example is a popular video blogger. Honda paid $10,000 for a 2-minute video that they produced. Influencer costs are pricey depending upon the scale at which you want to reach and who you are utilizing. And as I said, the costs of these campaigns with influencers is increasing dramatically because they've got the networks and they're in demand. And really, you're looking at it in terms of sheer audience. And so, again, you may be competing with a Sour Patch brand. You may also be competing with many other brands to get this influencer's audience. Now, the problem is this also leads to another problem, and that is that influencer marketing is very new, and it is, as I love to say, it's the latest shiny thing because it's you can always just by looking at the headlines and reading media headlines, you can always see what the shiniest thing is right now, and influencer marketing is all the rage. What's funny, if you look at all the articles about the power of influencer marketing, they tend to be written by influencers, which kind of serves their ability to up their prices. But there's a lot of problems underneath influencer marketing. One of which going on right now, there is a legal battle going on between a brand and a blogger because that blogger had inflated their user numbers. Now, this was found out when Facebook was trying to purge a lot of bot accounts from Facebook. And once they did that, this blogger's Facebook numbers went down dramatically, about 50%. And now the brand was claiming that the blogger purported to have many more followers than they did. And once Facebook purged the bots, now we're looking at half. And so it's a misrepresentation. What was interesting is it didn't take long for that blogger to boost those numbers right back up. There are services out there where you can buy followers and likes on any social network. I had the ad with me, but it's well known within the community that you can buy followers and likes. And so when they publish their numbers, you've got to look at some way of verifying it, but there's no way of knowing how many of their followers are bot accounts or purchased accounts that like them or follow them. Also, which also hits to some of the credibility aspect, is many times influencers, if they're paid to post or paid to review, their audiences don't always go along with it. Sometimes because when they are doing something that's paid and when they are promoting something, the voice is completely different. And as many users will call them out for being a shill for a brand when it's kind of contradictory to their personality. And so there are questions about the depth of influence of many of these influencers. And the other downside is many are very new to this market, and they're unfamiliar with contracts. They're unfamiliar with how to conduct themselves when dealing with a brand and the expectations. And so, again, then that gets to return on investment, the ability to measure. As you're dealing with more and more people, and now if you're using an influencer, you can track what comes to you, but ultimately you are subject to their measurements and all of these things. So while influencer marketing can be very powerful, it can develop followers, and really even the best campaigns are really sending, I would say, probably thousands of new followers to you. Um, but I'm still looking for many of those campaigns which are providing tangible leads from influencer marketing. And actually, those campaigns are very difficult to find. I see them taking place more on a smaller scale, targeted to more smaller, more defined audiences, and those are the ones that tend to generate more tangible measurements and returns on investment. Also, now this is the pro. At the very top, we looked at some of the numbers that influencer marketing can cost you depending upon the type of influencer. However, you don't have to go all out and hit there. You can look at multiple methods of buying social placement, and it's at any range. At the very bottom are sponsored tweets. Then you can do some sponsored posts with bloggers that cost a few hundred. You can buy social ads and boost things. You can do integrated ads. You can do programmatic buys, which are somewhere in the middle. And again, the more you target them, the less it costs, or the more you can put on the campaign. When you start looking at videos, there's production costs that go in there. However, paid video right now is probably one of the most effective means of reaching an audience. A study just came out last week where pre-roll video provides the highest brand recall of any media, as well it is seen as the least intrusive of all advertising media. So right now, pre-roll video is probably one of the most effective means of reaching people through social channels. The nice thing is, if you're doing it through YouTube, it reaches out. It can go all on people's Facebook. It can go on blogs, other sites. Pre-roll hits people where they are. So depending upon your budget, depending upon the type of campaign you want to run, there are multiple price points based on many factors determining on how you want to reach the audience you've got. Now, the last one, and then we can open this up for questions, discussion, whatever you want to do. The last thing is brand protection and control. When we're looking at social placement, one of the things that has come out recently, especially with the rise of fake news, when you are looking at publishing content, especially sponsored content, you know, can you control where that content shows up online, and may it show up next to a promoted post or a promoted article that is considered fake news? And then also, when ads are going out, when you are programmatically trying to target users, what if those users are on hate sites or on pornography sites, places where you don't want your ad to show? But then also, if you are partnering with an influencer, there have been cases where influencers have asked for free reign to develop the campaign, and ultimately what they create does not match brand guidelines, and it really takes the brand out of the brand guidelines and the control. And so there have been a few campaigns where the brand has had to pull out and still pay for the campaign, but pull out of the campaign and cancel it because the influencer was in total control of the messaging, total control of the campaign, and total control to the point where the brand felt it could not publish ultimately what was created because it didn't fit the voice, it didn't fit the control of the brand. And so a lot of factors that we've got to control in social placement is, the personality of the influencer and what they want to do and how much control they have. Also, with fake news and hate sites, these are very, can I say, very explosive touch points right now in the public mind. And so being aware of where your ads appear, what they appear next to, can affect the public perception of your brand. And so more than ever, marketers need to be aware of where their ads are showing up, how they're being perceived, as well as maintaining creative control of the message and the brand positioning.
Great, and I want to say one more thanks to Matt Bailey for joining us.
Hey, thank you
And
very much. Appreciate it.
thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you on the web.